All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our BCBA practice exam series with exam number 7. We're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please subscribe for all of our updates. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. It's October, and Kevin is showing you his yard, which is currently brown because of the dead grass. Kevin says, brown grass in October will create green grass in April. Kevin's phrase represents a what? Short question, pretty straightforward question, but a little obscure. And I find that a lot of verbal behavior questions can feel obscure, right? Because we're really looking for the specifics of each question to pinpoint what's represented with this verbal statement. And of course, the statement or phrase we're talking about is brown grass in October will create green grass in April. By saying that, what is Kevin implying with this statement? Well, he's saying if my grass is brown in October, then in April, it's going to be green. So what does that sound like? Well, to me, it sounds like a contingency. If grass is brown in October, then grass is green in April. So Kevin is making a verbal statement identifying a contingency. What do we call a verbal statement that identifies a contingency? A mand. Is Kevin requesting something? Is there a motivating operation where Kevin is making a request? No, he's just showing you his yard of the dead grass. So if anything, the dead grass is evoking this behavior from Kevin, which would make that more of a tact. Regardless, it isn't a mand. He's not requesting anything. There's no MO present where Kevin is making a request. What about a rule? We just said that Kevin is making a statement identifying a contingency. And that's what a rule is. It's a verbal statement that selects a contingency for the learner. Oftentimes, we refer to rules when we are, let's say, working with learners, right? And the idea behind a rule is the rule should come into place without immediate consequences, or even if no consequences are available. So Kevin, he might have to wait till April for the grass to be green. So it's going to be a long time before the consequence happens. But the rule is, as long as it's brown in October, he will get green grass in April. Now, what about a self rule? A self rule is imposed on one's self. It's almost like an automatic rule. And Kevin's not imposing this on himself, right? He's talking about the grass and what the grass looks like. Self rule is much more related to self management. And then an interverbal. If Kevin had responded to a verbal statement, this could have been looked at as an interverbal, but he didn't. He was showing the grass and then he said this. So Kevin's phrase most represents a rule. Remember, with verbal behavior, we want to think about what's evoking that behavior and then what's reinforcing that behavior. If we need to go further, then we look at formal similarities and we look at point-to-point correspondence. You design a word-to-picture intervention and train your technician on the procedure prior to the client's session on Tuesday. The procedure involves the technician handing the client a word like banana and having the client match the word to a picture of a banana. The client should then take the picture and go match it to a real object in the house without assistance. Matching the picture to a real object would be most like what? Now, it's kind of a little bit of a giveaway in the question itself because we're talking about matching the picture. It's kind of a matching to sample procedure. And if we look at our answer choices, we never jump ahead to the answer choices. But in this case, it's pretty obvious we're dealing with stimulus equivalences here, right? Reflexivity, symmetry, transitivity. And so on these questions, we really want to start to identify our variables, right? So the idea is we match the picture to a real object. What is that going to represent? Let's look at our situation. We have a word-to-picture intervention, training the technician, and the technician or the procedure that you're training the technician on involves handing the client a word like banana. So let's say this is A, right? And then the client has to match the word to a picture of a banana, which let's say it's B. The client should then take the picture and go match it to a real object in the house without assistance, which is C. So the client is taking the picture, B, and going match it to C. So if we're matching B to C, what is that most similar to? Is it A, reflexivity? Well, reflexivity represents an A equals A, B equals B, right? This is a direct match, okay, an identical match. The picture of the banana to the real object would not be the identical match, but it's still a match. And so it would be close to symmetry, which we could say is B equals C, right? And even if it isn't precisely symmetry, the question is asking about what it's most like. And so it's very similar to this idea of symmetry, where we have a picture, B, which is very similar to C. Transitivity would be if we can somehow get the word banana, right? Or to equal the object in the house. And then after B equals C, and then we have A equals C, right? And then A equals B equals C. Okay, but we're not there yet. We're simply focusing on matching the picture of the banana B to the real object C. So what that is most like is going to be symmetry. Now, don't get too confused with stimulus equivalence. It's not that difficult once you internalize it. And if it helps you, label your variables, and then you can just match them up. Well, if A equals A, then we're probably talking about reflexivity. If we're more looking at like B equals C, A equals C, maybe that's more like symmetry. If we're to the point where A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C, then we've all made it all the way to transitivity. So that's how you want to start thinking about it. We want to avoid using jargon when communicating with stakeholders and naive observers. What would be the best way to explain the fair pair rule to a client's mom? So remember, one of our ideas on our code is we want to speak in language where stakeholders and observers can understand, especially when talking to parents and untrained participants. So jargon is when we talk in very behavior analytic terms. When you're on the exam, we're going to use it behavior analytic terms. Talking to other behavior analysts, talking to technicians, sure. Stakeholders, we want to avoid. So how are we going to explain the fair pair rule without using jargon? Let's start by identifying what is the fair pair rule. Fair pair rule says if we are taking away a behavior or decreasing a behavior, we need to put something in its place, ideally something functionally equivalent. How are we going to explain that? A, the fair pair rule dictates that when punishment is provided, it must be followed up with some type of reinforcement or positive interaction. Well, one, we're using a lot of analytic term. Two, that is not the fair pair rule. A is out. B, whenever we teach a client a new behavior that serves a function or purpose, we must remove another behavior that serves the same function or purpose. This is the opposite, right? The fair pair rule says when we remove a behavior, then we teach. Not we teach first, then remove. B is out. C, if we decrease or remove a behavior, we must make sure there's another behavior in its place that serves the same purpose or meets the same need. This is the closest so far to the fair pair rule. And, right, it's very easy to understand. When we take away a behavior, we're going to get another behavior there that's going to meet the same purpose or need. D, when we first start out, we want to pair praise with as many reinforcers as possible so that praise starts to reinforce behavior. Again, not the fair pair rule, that's out. So our best answer here is going to be C. Notice how we go through each answer choice. We understand why the wrong ones are wrong, and then we can explain why the right one is right. We're always looking for that best answer. So understanding why the wrong answers aren't the best is going to really help you on test day. Just for fun, you taught your son different types of birds when he was 5 years old. When you went on walks, you would point out different birds you saw. Now, your son is 22 years old, and he will still point out birds to you when you're outside hanging out, even though you taught him years ago. What is demonstrated in this scenario? All right, so we're looking at your son, and you did teach him, right? Different types of birds when he was 5. You taught him a bunch of different types of birds. And so you'd go on walks, you'd point out different birds. Now, son is 22 years old, many years later, and he's still pointing out birds to you when you're outside hanging out, even though you taught him years ago. What are you demonstrating here? What is being demonstrated? Well, when we look at this phrase, taught him years ago, when we think about teaching that's no longer occurring, we have to start thinking about maintenance immediately. And this is a pretty easy question because this is pretty clear maintenance. If you taught him when he was 5 and he's 22 and he can still do the behavior, that is clear maintenance. He's not B, overgeneralizing because he's these behaviors are happening at appropriate times, not too much. Generalization's fine. He's not imitating you because this is happening way, way, way after the fact. So clearly, our answer here is going to be A, maintenance. And so hopefully you said, well, that's a really easy question. That's good. Remember, not every question is going to be the hardest question you've ever seen. When you get an easy question, trust your prep, pick your best answer, move on. Don't try to argue or fight easy questions. Those should be looked at as gifts, right? Take the gift and move on. After a month of working with the client 4 to 5 times per week, you, a behavior analyst, tell your technician that you're going to come out for an entire session and watch them implement the entire treatment plan. You say you want to check that all procedures and treatments are being done correctly. What are you likely checking for? All right, so let's think about this question, right? Where the question is asking about what you're checking for. And specifically, you are a behavior analyst and you're going to come out to the session, watch the whole entire treatment plan to check that procedures and treatments are being done correctly. This is a very overarching supervision session, right? It's very broad. I want to see the whole plan, make sure it's done correctly. What are you looking for exactly? A, the resources available to the staff. We don't specify resources here. Could that be a possible issue that could come up if, let's say, the treatment isn't done correctly? Well, sure, right? What about B, the integrity of the treatment? What's another way to say that? Well, another way to say that is treatment integrity. So, really, treatment integrity is a much better answer, much more catch all than just resources. Because integrity might be dependent on resources, right? Might be dependent on how convenient it is to the staff, right? It might be dependent on, is the parent willing to implement outside of service delivery? So if you're coming in to check that all procedures and treatments are being done correctly, you might be looking for these things, but the first thing you're going to say is, if treatments aren't being done correctly, well, the integrity might be compromised. There might be something wrong with the integrity of the treatment. And once we identify the integrity of the treatment is compromised, then we can identify reasons why. Maybe resources, maybe convenience, maybe parents. But all you're doing in this particular session is looking at the integrity as a whole. Once you identify the integrity or lack of, then you can narrow down the reasons why. All right, thank you for watching. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials. Be sure to subscribe to help us out and get all of our updates. Let us know when you pass. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.